I think it's really interesting that David Icke, say, complains of, I don't know, being connected to the hive mind, even though he already is. I mean, you're right now speaking to thousands of people simultaneously, which is a selective hive mind, via a piece of tech. It's just not integrated into your brain. That's the only difference. As for Wi-Fi fields, do you think that the internet is a simulated reality pulled over our eyes, or just an interface? Because it's
he's saying we're already in a false reality. Sorry, I'll shut up. He's saying we're already in a false reality, and they're creating a system within a system, right, David?
That's absolutely right. But there's a big difference from what the gentleman's just said, that we're in a hive mind and all that stuff as we're speaking. But, there's a difference between having connections with people and communications with people, and having the perceptions that we make of what we say and what we make of what other people say.
The system, it's going to show us the input it wants, is the issue.
Yeah, being given to us by a hive mind. It was kind of funny how sci-fi kind of later mirrors reality. This is probably not a coincidence either. And in Star Trek, they had the Borg, and the Borg were kind of a kind of part technological kind of race. And what they did was infuse people with like nano probes to make them part of the Borg hive mind, the collective, as they called it. And those nano probes we now call smart dust, nanobots, nanotechnology, all these things. And this is all building this hive mind that I'm talking about. And like I say, communication is fine and interaction is fine. We should have it. Of course we should. That's why I'm glad the Putin interview happened. But there's a big difference between that and having our perceptions controlled in and
David, let me say this. Notice how the globalists want to kill individual free communication in the internet. They want it to all be through this filter, which is another form of the virtual reality paradigm you're talking about. But I forget the name of the person commenting, but sir, do you want to have a comeback to David Icke? Go ahead.
Yeah, you're already connected to all of this. You think that everything is different, or that we don't have this smart dust, so to speak. You don't need smart dust when you have a device that is capable of all the things that you've mentioned, and you are already connected to the hive mind. What the hell are you communicating on right now? Who are you communicating with? All the people. Their perceptions shared through a medium of speech. Like, there is structurally no difference between having a bunch of nanobots running through your bloodstream accomplishing the same thing when you're holding a device that is connected to this thing that is a field of information that is the internet. There's nothing wrong about it. There's nothing strange about it. It's just the way things are. Integrating stuff like this into ourselves biologically just removes the latency and decreases the latency for information transmission.
By the way, I think this is Elon Musk.
There's literally no difference.
Is this Elon Musk?
It's really not. No, it's really not. I'm just weird. Don't worry about it.
Well, you could be a dead ringer for him. Well, the Elon clone, what else do you want to say?
100%.
Elon clone, go ahead.
Yeah, there are theories. There are theories. Yeah, there are theories. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of stupid. Don't worry about it.
This is Give Them an Argument. I am joined, as always, by our super producer, Jake Appett, and our very talented graphic designer, J. Andrew World. In a few minutes, we are going to be joined by Richard RJ Eskow to talk about his excellent current affairs essay, The Dystopias of Yesterday, right? Yesterday's Dystopias, one of those. In any case, it's a really interesting essay. Gets into the experience of Dystopias of Yesterday. There we go. Got it right the first time. Gets into the experience of growing up in a very different world as a fan of science fiction, and the ways that the dystopian fiction he was reading was informed by the politics of the creators, and the ways that in some ways the present feels like a science fiction dystopia, from the past. It's a really interesting essay, really fun essay. Really looking forward to chatting about that. But before that, Andy, what the fuck was that?
That was a clip from Alex Jones, where Adrian Dittman, who the internet does not know who he is, if he's a real person or if he's an alt of Elon Musk. It's a Twitter account that praises Elon Musk a lot. But however,
his voice sounds just like Elon Musk.
Yeah. And so like whether it's Elon Musk or somebody doing a type of AI thing where to make himself sound like Elon Musk, it's kind of brilliant either way. To hear him like call into Alex Jones and ask questions about, the mind viruses and, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, in a way, just having a possible ambiguous Elon Musk alt, weird fanboy has a really good imitation of Elon Musk, calling into Alex Jones is weird enough that you almost miss the fact, like it's almost lost in all the other weirdness, that the guest is David Icke, right? Who is best known for, is actually, like all the best people, Kirsten Sinema, etc. David Icke used to be a Green Party guy, but he is best known now for his belief in lizard people who are controlling everything. Yeah, as an artist rendition of lizard person with a human mask. I believe that's Hillary Clinton. And according to David Icke, there are many of your favorite politicians, globalists, etc., are in fact lizard people. And just the fact that David Icke is like the least crazy thing going on in that screen is kind of amazing in itself.
Yeah, he was the voice of reason, which was like Elon Musk is like basically saying, I'm calling him Elon Musk.
Let's call him Elon. Yeah,
he was basically saying there's no difference between having this and this being literally
in your brain,
in my brain. Which is structurally there's no difference. Because I didn't really know who David Icke was, but you guys told me he was a lizard people guy. But then when I was watching that, I was like, I agree with David Icke on this. It's different to like talk to people on the internet
as opposed to having your brain have like a chip in it. That's those do seem importantly different to me. Also. I would say probably the rest of David Icke's views, you probably find more areas of disagreement. Was
Alex Jones saying that, just to be clear, David Icke, you think that we're already in a simulation? I think that's what he was saying. And then this is a simulation.
There's a lot of talk of the Matrix in this segment.
But it's funny that David Icke is so worried about like nanobots being in your brain when we're already in a simulation. I feel like at that point, just go out and fucking eat the burger like what's his name does in the Matrix. If we're already in a simulation, I'm not going to worry about going like 2 levels deep and worrying about like further infiltration. I said, just enjoy your life at that point, I think.
Yeah, I always thought it was a shame that the Matrix sequels that, they had, like when Keanu gets up to talk to the architect at the end of the second one, that like the architect just like babbles incoherent nonsense at him. And it really seems like they're missing a trick there. Surely the twist should have been like second level Matrix, right?
Yeah. we could all agree.
Fun fact about David Icke. I have not read any of his books, so I suppose I can't comment, but I do think I have a PDF of one of them lying around because a couple of years ago I read Meghan McCain's book, Bad Republican, to review for Jacobin, and I actually listened to the audiobook. It's very short. It's like whatever, it's padded out with stuff like she literally spends like paragraphs describing memes she saw that she thinks are funny. Like it's that kind of book, and It's still really short, right? But as I was writing this review for Jacobin, so I listened to it on the audiobook, but then I just grabbed a PDF that I found online because, I wanted to like look up a couple specific passages to reference for the review. And whatever website I was getting that from, the PDF I downloaded at the end of Meghan McCain's book has one of David Icke's books. So I think it's possible that this is just a thing that David Icke's followers do to try to get the word out, that they like stick his books at the end of, of books that, unsuspected globalist shills might read.
Or people they think as lizard people.
Right. Yeah, if you're reading one of the lizard people books, and surely Megan McCain is a lizard person. I mean, just a masterful manipulator. If there's ever has been one. All right. So do you want to watch, we're going to be joined by RJ in just a few minutes, I think, but do you want to watch just a little bit more of this conversation?
Yeah, I think Elon has a little bit more to say. Let's see.
Okay.
All right. It's kind of stupid. Don't worry about it.
Well, what else would you like to say, sir?
I just think this. I just think it is ironic. I mean, you want to talk about the simulation? Everybody started speaking of the topic of simulation, how we're in this false reality ever since the Matrix movie dropped. A lot of people are afraid of it, but they don't even understand the context of why the movie even happened and why everyone's so afraid of it. When in reality, everybody got afraid of being integrated with machines and how machines were advancing faster than the things that created them. Thereby, the fear caused the disaster, which then caused the simulation within the Matrix. It's crazy, right? And even then, everybody bases their ideology of a simulation based off of a movie that they themselves haven't even fully understood. Because if you did, you'd realize that there is no real world at all. I mean, what do you think this is? And even if it is a simulation, what are you going to do? You're going to break it? What's the point? I mean, you can play it and you can build really cool shit. You can craft it and make it better. I think that's what you have to do. If you're going to break it, that's just an equivalent of killing yourself. If you're going to break it for everyone else, then that's called mass murder. That's called genocide. So don't break the simulation. I don't understand the resistance for understanding the world in which we're in, to the extent that we say we could shape it to make it better, but we're just trying to understand it to break it.
Well, whoever this is, please don't hang up. We're on radio station. We have to go to break in a moment. But David Icke, you're talking to somebody that AI print is Elon Musk, or is his twin, his doppelganger. What do you want to say to this caller?
Well, is it better that we know about the reality that we're in and how we're creating it and what it's designed to do, or not to know and be in complete ignorance of the very reality we are experiencing? What people do with the knowledge of understanding the reality that they are in is up to them completely. But we should surely be pursuing an understanding of what is this place? What are we doing here? Otherwise, we just go through life being pawns of a game we don't
David, we got to go to break, and I want to ask the X poster that sounds just like Elon Musk, a dead ringer. Please stay there if you can. We're on radio station, so we have to at least break twice an hour. We got to go to a 3-minute break. We're going to come right back. I hope the caller stays there. It sounds just like Elon Musk. But I get the point of the Elon Musk sounding person. He's saying if we don't use tools, like the Native Americans didn't have guns, so they lost. He's saying, why not use it? It's kind of what I'm getting. But we'll come right back and have the person that sounds just like Elon Musk, a little bit of an angry Elon Musk, finish up what he wants to say, and they'll get David Icke here. I am in the twilight zone right now. Got David Icke and a guy that sounds just like Elon Musk. And I've been on it with 2.5 hours with Elon Musk before. We're going to figure this out. This is News Megan. Stay with us. Media matters.
Yeah,
the Democratic Party.
That, the part that confuses me most about this is Alex thinking that sounds like an angry Elon Musk. That sounds like a calm Elon Musk.
That's true. Maybe, I guess Elon's probably usually in a good mood when he's talking to Alex Jones. This is the most angry he's seen him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of the times I've heard Elon's voice, he sounds like kind of vaguely irritated. Like, it's like that sounded pretty, that sounded pretty chill. I actually think that's probably not Elon, although it was pretty close. But but in any case, that guy sounded reasonably chill. It is pretty funny. Do you know what he's talking about when he said he was on for 2.5 hours with Elon Musk?
I have to look that up.
Okay.
Yeah, Andy's our expert on these kind of things. So,
that's true. That's true. This is definitely his area. This is because, that would be pretty funny if it were true. And it would actually be even funnier if Elon Musk actually was like just calling in with his alt account to Alex Jones. Because, famously at one point, like not long after Elon acquired Twitter, he was refusing to bring Alex Jones back onto the platform. Right? He said, somebody said, oh, you should bring back Alex Jones, and he quote tweeted it, and with something about Sandy Hook and a quote from the Bible about not suffering those who hurt little children or something like that, which was one of the early signs that it's okay, what he really means about the free speech absolutism is that stuff that doesn't happen to personally offend him is fine, which is a great standard that you just have one really rich dude who important communication platforms are just kind of governed by his whims. But yes, if he's gone all the way around the event horizon on this, and that not only is he allowed to be on Twitter, but that he'll call into his radio show anonymously just because he's that eager to talk to Alex Jones, that would be a pretty amazing plot twist.
Yeah, according to this article, back in December, Elon did an about face, unbanned Alex Jones, brought him on X, and
host interview with him. Wow,
and hosted an interview with him. Yeah, so there's definitely two wolves inside of Elon Musk.
They're both terrible.
Well, but they have the neural link, so it's really just kind of one wolf.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I do see that we've got RJ, so let's bring him on. Richard,
hello.
Welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be back. I don't see myself in the corner there. Is something wrong?
Yeah, we see you.
Okay. I'm just a black square on my. I'm just a void on my my own screen, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes you stare at the void and the void stares back. Anyway, it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So I really enjoyed this essay. This is the dystopias of yesterday, and it's really about a few things at once. But one of them is this vivid sense that that the present was once the past, and and the less distant past was also the past. I am younger than you. We did the math and realized that, but one of the things I thought about while I was reading this is I could really vividly remember. I think it was the mid 90s sometime that President Clinton approved the global positioning system for civilian use. And I can vividly remember being in a Radio Shack, which is already a story that, a fact that locates the story well into the past, and seeing a GPS that was sold there, for a car, and in the late 90s, and I'd never heard of it before, and just looking at the description and thinking, well, that can't possibly be real. That's just silly. Right? That doesn't even make sense. How is that possible? Because it sounded like some total science fiction nonsense.
Well, I'll go you one better, as you might expect, given our difference in age, which is, and good to see Andy and Jake. And Andy and I go back a long ways, but mostly through social media. So good to see you. I was dating a young woman in college who had a job in the offices of Macy's or something in Oakland, one of the department stores. And she said, we got this machine where you can send an image of a document all the way to our office in New York, and it only takes about 25 minutes each page to call the fax. And in 25 minutes, you can send a page to, it's just ridiculous, right? So.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So this is, you talk in the essay, there are several things like this, but, of course, the main thing is that you're talking about the visions of the future that you were growing up reading. made me think of the Simpsons clip where where Martin talks about the science fiction that that he wants people to read. We have that.
As your president, I would demand a science fiction library featuring an ABC of the overlords of the genre. Asimov, Bester, Clark. Well, what about Ray Bradbury? I will wear his work. Thank you, and keep watching the skies. Excellent, Martin.
I actually couldn't see it.
Can you hear it?
No, I couldn't. No.
Oh wow. Okay.
So give me the quick price.
I don't know. Jake, you want to take that?
Yeah, we're gonna do the voices. No, but what was the which character? What's that guy's name, Ben?
Martin.
Okay.
Yeah,
no, Ben,
he's like the overachiever nerd of.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah. And he's saying that he wants to make it mandatory that the greats of science fiction are read, right? And he names Asimov and was it Clark? Ben?
Bester.
It was and then
and
someone says, "What about who did he name?"
Yeah, it was Asimov, Bester, and Clark.
Oh yeah. And then
It was
another,
the ABCs of
the ABCs, yeah. And then another kid says, "What about Ray Bradbury?" And he goes, "I'm aware of his work."
See, that's the thing. Bradbury was always like I read him, but he was always the science fiction writer that like your mom and dad read. He was like acceptable in which made him less interesting, kind of. And there was an inherent conservatism in Bradbury's whole aesthetic too. Whereas Bester, come on, and Clark was a technologist, but he was such a good one. And Asimov, I think I write in the piece about the fact that I sent a fan letter and a short story to Isaac Asimov when I was 12. And ever diplomatic but refusing to be dishonest, he wrote me a card back saying, "Nice to hear from you, Richard. Keep writing." No compliments whatsoever, which is entirely appropriate. But and so it was nice of it, right?
Yeah, and something in the beginning of the essay, something that you point out is that's really interesting and kind of revealing in terms of both, the larger theme about the actual, what's different about the world that produced these dystopias and the world that we're living in, and also, the dystopias themselves, is that so much of the stuff that you were reading, that was, like what you're mostly concerned with in this piece, not, stories about, galactic empires in the year 3000 or anything like that, but,
Right.
But these dystopian projections of the future were set about 40 years in the future, which makes sense maybe in a different way than it would now, right? Because if you if you think about the sort of scale of change between 1910 and 1950, you could set a story in 1950 and 1990, and it's kind of sky's the limit about what you can get people to suspend disbelief about.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And it seemed to just be constantly accelerating. So that, the difference between 1910 and 1950 was astonishing. The difference between 1950 and 1965 was mind-boggling. And so it was logical to assume that this would keep accelerating ad infinitum, kind of Moore's law, if Moore's law in computing, but it just applied to all technology. I remember going to the World's Fair 1965 in New York, and Futurama was the big General Motors display of the city of the future, meaning like 1990. And, domed city and, elevated tracks. And everybody just assumed that infrastructure would be accelerating at the same rate as every other form of technology. Whereas, we accelerated in the silicon chip iPhone sense, but did not at all. Infrastructure requires people. People requires laborers, and that didn't fit into the low budget dystopia that we wound up with.
Speaking of dystopias, I think I just banned a robot from our chat that was trying to sell mushrooms and guns and armaments, I think, that I had to ban, and I couldn't. I was trying to figure out while you were talking if it was a person or a robot. So I didn't. It only occurred to me after I banned them that there's that would have been
how you didn't do a torrent test first.
If I were an insidious robot entity, I would, of course, try to sell hallucinogens and weapons to every human I could reach, and the results, I dare say, would be predictable.
Yes.
That's the story I want to read.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's funny. I should have put this in this story, but it's not an accident that the generation raised on this futurism and technology, meaning the kids of my generation and really older too, also became the generation that pioneered psychedelics. Because I remember, I really should have put this in the story. I remember I was I guess I would have been about 12 years old. I was watching The Outer Limits, one of those shows with my friend Robbie over at Robbie's house. And there was an episode about a Timothy Leary character, and he's promoting psychedelics. And, I knew vaguely who Timothy is, very famous. I vaguely knew who he was. And he said, well, when you take this drug, it's like you're changing channels on reality and watching a different reality. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. This was like, there was something about these various alternative realities that seemed to sort of pave the way. And then there was all the rhetoric about, exploring inner space and all that, So I think there's a
Philip K. Dick too. Like,
what's that?
Philip K. Dick in that era. Philip K. Dick in that era also kind of was just starting to write about that kind of like taking drugs to kind of medicate yourself. Big part of what do androids dream of electric sheep, and was it the three stigmatas of
Palmer Eldritch? Yeah.
Palmer Eldritch, yeah. But of course he was also taking drugs to write those novels massively. And he was amazing. Amazing imagination, and he wrote the books like someone who was really high. He was
also like disassociated in time, according to him, and but living life as a first century Christian, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so he has a massive book about that. Yeah. So actually, that would have been great for this article too, because he thought he was a first century Christian and that this was his dystopic hallucination, that none of this was true, that he really was in the first century imagining all this as a kind of hell.
Yeah, the empire never ended, that real time stopped in 70 CE when the Romans destroyed the temple, and that everything since then is just an illusion. The real first century Christians are trying to make contact with him, but I do think that one of the interesting things about Philip K. Dick here is that he's not Timothy Leary in the sense that he certainly took a lot of drugs and he writes about them, but it's never like an advertisement for them, right? It's always a pretty grim view of it, right? And even Valis, that novel we were talking about, part of what makes it an interesting book is that it's not just like, hey, here's the crazy stuff that I think. It's him sitting around for much of the book, talking to talking to these versions, like these characters, David and Kevin, who I think are based on two other writers that I knew, Tim Powers and KW Jader, and having them, you know, and having both of them in different ways be like extremely skeptical and extremely funny about all of the crazy stuff that he's saying, right? You know, like I think it would have been a way less interesting book if it were just like, oh yeah, here's the truth. Come join my new religion.
Well, the other thing to understand about Philip K. Dick, and I mean, I'm a huge fan, but you know, is the nature of the drugs he was taking. He took a lot of speed, and you know, to crank these books out real fast because they didn't pay very well. So it affected his writing. Like Time Out of Joint is such a brilliant premise, but kind of, you know, falls apart by the end. But also that stuff makes you paranoid. So the combination of the sort of hallucinogenic quality and the paranoia, it seems to be part of the sort of cocktail of you know, psychic phenomena that was Philip K. Dick, right? I mean, hallucinogenic, but utterly paranoid. You know, so it was great, you know, but that's my theory anyway as to how he what shaped that.
Yeah, I mean the you know, Scatter Darkly, which is the one Philip K. Dick book that was turned into a movie that's actually similar to the source material, is right. You know, is all about this incredibly, you know, bleak vision of you know, people being, you know, which apparently comes from, you know, from a when he was in rehab, that which he had he had a breakdown while he was in Vancouver, and the rehab he could find was for heroin addicts, which is like, you know, pretty clearly the one thing he had not ever actually done.
No.
You know, I mean, you know, I mean, what he was actually doing was like, you know, milkshakes blended with, you know, speed, right? You know, and like, and he looked like it, right? So he did not look like a heroin addict, but he managed to talk himself into it. And like, while he was in the clinic, he had this sort of paranoid vision of what if the people who were running the clinic were also manufacturing drugs in order to like drum up more business for the rehab clinic, you know. So yeah, I mean that is
he foresaw the opioid epidemic. He was hallucinating the Sackler family.
Yeah.
No, of course, not really.
Yeah. That'd be too horrible. Couldn't happen.
Right. I mean, that's too dystopian for anybody, you know. But then you contrast his sort of paranoid speed visions with a novel like Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein, which is, you know, in many ways,
yeah, that really is. Here's the truth. Come join my new religion.
Right, and very psychedelic, very, you know, let's all get high together, and this is the way it's going to be, and but also very, as was characteristic of Heinlein's politics, very individualistic, right? I mean, it was an individualized form of salvation. It was, you know, built around a charismatic character, and it was a retreat into your own world, kind of. All the kids I knew in high school, you know, the nerd crowd of my sci-fi friends and myself, the libertarian inclined ones were the ones who really loved that book. I mean, I did too. I was magnetized by it. But the libertarians saw something of themselves in that I think the rest of us didn't. Like the same kids who said, "You've got to read Atlas Shrugged. It is the best book ever written in the history of humanity," were the kids who really got into Stranger in a Strange Land. In an odd way, it kind of, I was thinking about that before we started talking this evening, because you know, this talking to someone today about the intersection between COVID denialism and the wellness yoga movement, right? And in a sense, it almost prefigures that in a funny way.
Yeah, and there is something very strange about the fact that Heinlein wrote "Stranger in a Strange Land," which is, yes, very individualistic, but it's also very, psychedelic, free-lovey, etc. But look, this is the same guy who wrote Starship Troopers, and there is something. There is something very strange going on there. I think it is ultimately compatible, but I mean, like, it sort of doesn't look like it on the surface.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, the one
right.
argument about timeline though is like he comes up with like ideas of how society is going to look in the future, and then explores that, devoid of whatever his actual politics are. So there is a weirdness of incongruity of various worlds that he creates, trying to understand like his politics.
Yeah, maybe. Although
I mean,
I also, oh, sorry, you were saying it, Richard.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe, right. Although I do wonder if, even though on the one hand this sort of ode to militarism feels like a weird, feels like a weird fit, with the Stranger in a Strange Land stuff. Ultimately, I think if you just kind of straightforwardly read him as a as a libertarian with a hawkish foreign policy, right? Like that might actually be enough to take in all of it, right? There's the mood is a harsh mistress, right? That's the sort of really explicit libertarianism book, and then Stranger in a Strange Land, and then even Starship Troopers, that which is like, look, there's no there's nothing socially uptight going on in Starship Troopers. In fact, there's quite the opposite, right? But it's just that it's very important that everybody, join the army and kill the commies. I mean, the bugs.
Right. The non-human enemy. I mean, I think that's right. And I think that, it fits with my working definition in recent years of a libertarian, and I'm not talking about left libertarianism, but a libertarian is a conservative who likes to get high. I mean, that's, he was precursor of that too. So he was prophetic in a way. And as you know, in the article I wrote, I quote a story I was fascinated with as a kid by Heinlein called "The Roads Must Roll," where in 1943 or so, he was predicting that by the 1950s, we wouldn't have cars, we would have super fast conveyor belts, and everybody would transport themselves this way, and there were restaurants on them, and he goes into everything about how it would work. But the bad guys are the all-powerful union leaders who threaten to shut the roads down. It's like, and the most science fiction-y thing, by the 1960s, the union leaders are threatening to strike and paralyze the country. And so, I think I said that the most science fiction-y thing about it was the idea that in late 1960s America, unions would have the ability to shut down anything because they were already being deplatformed by then. So, but that was, that typical of his biases. The stereotype of the union boss as thug and all of that stuff. So.
Right. That was a very, like, I actually looked for that story a little bit after I read your essay to see if I could find it anywhere online, and my Google foo wasn't sufficient to the task, but the actual science fiction setup of it seemed kind of funny too. I was trying to understand that. You said there was something about how the cars in this version of the future could go less than 60 miles an hour.
Right. That was one of his that it was against the law for a car on a highway to travel any slower than 65 or 75 miles an hour. But you could go as fast as you wanted, which is the ultimate, of course, libertarian fantasy. But he thought it through. Like, okay, if you had these super fast roads that always moved, how would you get super fast, right? Because how would you would have to like get on it at some point. It was super fast. You'd be torn in two. So he explains all of that, how there are a series of conveyor belts, each is slightly faster than another. So you step on a slow one and then move to a faster one. By the time you get to the 10th one, you're going 100 miles an hour. And there's a faster one. And then you eat at Joe's and all of that. So
that's part of Asimov's world building too, in the what is it, the Caves of Steel, the robot detective trilogy, where the detective is on those fast moving walkways. But I think in more of a typical Asimov style, he just tells you that they're there, and then there's like a chase scene on it, like later in the book. He doesn't spend time being like, well, there's a slow one that goes to a faster one. Like he does. He just lets you know, and then it comes back in a satisfying way later.
And I loved all of his books growing up. Obviously, I wrote to him. I mean, but I was a big fan of all of his books growing up, and his short stories. And Arthur C. Clarke wrote some great short stories. Ray Bradbury wrote several really good short stories, but some of them, to say they didn't age well is putting it mildly. Insanely racist. A couple of them, like mind-boggling racist. And some of them are just not that good, but a few of them are really good. Are classics. I'll give them that.
I was watching a musician once talking about listening to the Ray Bradbury collection on like as an audiobook, and it was read by Ray Bradbury, and he's like, I couldn't take it seriously. It was just this old Jewish man going, and the Martians come down and they started invading us. And
yeah, he wasn't Jewish though. He was Midwestern, like Methodist or something, but maybe he sounded Jewish.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember a joke from 20 years ago. So he was a liberal icon for a while after he wrote Fahrenheit 451. And then he turned out to be more of a right-wing curmudgeon later. But I think he had pretty progressive positions early on. Asimov was probably a socialist. So what I didn't get to write about, and there just wasn't space in this article, but I found a primitive, a paper equivalent of what we would have called a bulletin board in the 90s, right? Online bulletin board for science fiction writers. And a number of the famous ones were in it and they were trying to form a guild or union and organize. Fascinating. I mean, I got to go back and dive into it again, but some of the political differences came out, and you had real leftists in there. I mean, real socialists, Marxists, and then you had, the Heinlein types. So it's kind of interesting historical document.
Yeah, there might be something interesting there about the way that this appeals to people who, in one direction or another, think that society as it exists is a problem, right? So you might there might be a reason why, even so many of the right wingers who write science fiction aren't just normal, boring right wingers. They're like insane libertarians who want to privatize the sidewalks because at least it's like some kind of, fundamental dissatisfaction with society as it is.
Right. I tweeted something sarcastically about, there was an online conference, libertarian conference I was listening to. I didn't tweet about it. I wrote about it in the blog 3 Quarks Daily, but someone said, well, you could create markets in green lights that when cars came to an intersection, they could electronically bid on who gets the green light first. So I wrote a sarcastic piece about it, and Tyler Cohen, the libertarian blogger, economist blogger, reposted it as a serious endorsement. And I've written about Tyler Cohen. He's a smart guy, but I mean, his craziness blinded to the fact, because I think I said something like, that could work great. You could just find an expensive car and follow it, and then they'd pay for the green light and you go right through. I mean, I was just like making fun of the idea. But yeah, markets and everything. He has a little segment, markets and everything. So.
Yeah, this is, which, I mean, certainly, God, I remember there's some, Heinlein novel where they are making a big point of how there's this, I don't know if it's the moon or some other planet, but you need breathable air, and it's being bought or sold, and like what if the characters who's like the it's like the dumb socialist who doesn't understand is like, oh, this is horrible. How can you sell that? Right? This is like, surely everybody has a right to it. And that's just kind of treated as like, oh, look at how ridiculous it is that this guy doesn't understand that, there's no free lunch, and, you have to, like they're like, of course you're going to sell the air. That's fine.
Right. Well, that's why really Ayn Rand was a science fiction writer, because she was so, in a way, because she was so detached from reality, it was so fantastical and grotesque what she wrote. But you raised an interesting point, Ben, about, people who are into science fiction and have huge are more likely to have huge ideas about remaking the world, right? Remaking society, redesigning the world. The left, I think, has lost a lot of that. That is really now the purview of some of the old right and some of the new right, certainly the tech overlord right. I mean, they are convinced they're going to remake the world in their image. They're doing pretty well at it, unfortunately. But the left has stopped thinking big. I mean, this is a major complaint of mine. Maybe we need to distribute a present company accepted, of course. But I mean, maybe we have to start, distributing science fiction to people. I think that's why people resonated so much. Kim Stanley Robinson, I've interviewed him several times. Great, but it wasn't until he wrote Ministry for the Future, then I couldn't reach him anymore. But he became a kind of oracular figure for the left a little bit. Even like people like Ezra Klein or whatever wanted to interview him because he was thinking in big terms about it, which he'd been doing for a long time. But I think that was his breakthrough book to more of the mainstream. But it seems more like the exception than the rule. It's the right wingers that are having the big, and they have transformed society since Reagan in ways that the left can't imagine. So.
Oh, yes, our friend Jason has a 100 peso super chat. Is the asking what kind of amp is RJ playing through?
It's a Fender DeVille. It's like a high-powered Fender Deluxe reverb, basically. And I have a 52 custom shop Telecaster and a Strat and a 1969 Gibson 550, which people mistake for 450, which people were mistake for a 355, a Clapton BB King, and then a bunch of other instruments.
I thought Jason paid us $100 to get that information. It's peso, so it's peso estimate. Okay, he's in.
No,
I forgot.
No, I was going to split it with 4 ways.
No, it's a no. Ben would keep 99% of that.
What is that?
But
mean? I think is that another kind
it's
of
pesos,
currency?
right? It's
MX pesos.
Mexico. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
But the Ministry for the Future was on Obama's list of best books of the of
yes,
the year.
The best books that his focus group told him to pretend to have read.
Yeah, because
like his playlist. Same deal. It's funny because Stan Robinson is a straight up Marxist. I mean, he's a flat out Marxist. And he wrote a book called Red Moon. I interviewed him about is set in the future where China is like running everything, right? And
There's
you
some
know, an
Kim
American
Stanley Robinson book that has like a background detail. Is this something called the Mondragon Convention that like instituted universal workers' control of production?
It sounds like him.
I think that's from a Kim Stanley Robinson book, but yeah,
he's a guy who's like Heinlein. He wants to give you like the whole history of how everything happened. On one of the times he came on my show, I imitated for him what he would have sounded like in 1870 if he was like describing a taxi cab ride, you know, which is because everything is like the opposite of what Asimov did. Like, and then the vehicle operator pressed down on a flat plane, which caused a flood of gasoline, flammable liquid. You know, I mean, it's okay. But
my girlfriend's trying to read. She's working through Red Mars, and she said she loved it, but now there's like 100 pages that just seems like a science, it's like a description of a science experiment.
There's like pages of like talking about pH balance of soil.
Right, exactly. But the Red Moon thing. What was interesting about it is, you know, I don't want to misquote him, but I said, wow, you know, there's kind of an assumption in this book that China is going to dominate the future. He said, well, I'm rooting for them, you know, basically, you know. So it's funny that he's on Obama's list, but he doesn't know, you know.
Obama has I feel, I guess I can't know, but I feel arbitrarily very certain that Obama's read very little of what's on his list, and very little of what's on his playlist has actually had like more than one play on his Spotify, etc.
I mean, I'm not an Obama fan, but I will say that when he was running for president, I read a Q&A he did with some students. Well, one of them started to mention Margaret Mead. And when she did, he said, "Oh, I'm hip to Margaret Mead." And I thought, well, it would be interesting to have a president who says things like, "I'm hip to Margaret Mead," but in the end, it wasn't that interesting. That's the problem.
Yeah, a lot of neoliberal status quo and like actually, it's one of the interesting things about, you know, probably the nicest thing I have to say about Joe Biden is that he's the first president of the last three who seems to actually just want to be president. Like, he doesn't seem to want to be a celebrity, right? You know, he just wants to do the president thing, right? Like, he's not releasing, you know, playlists. He's not showing us his, you know, his like basketball bracket. You know, he's saying, you know, he's not displayed his craft beer recipes, right? Like, that seemed to be all the stuff that, you know, that Obama really liked. And of course, you know, and of course Trump just, you know, is his own thing, is so generous, you know, but you
although
know,
I kind of wish if he was, his dogs would like be mauling people at like press conferences. It would be great.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what a Joe Biden playlist would look like. I would be curious about that.
Yeah, would there be anything that was released since he graduated from high school?
Right, I know. That's what I was thinking. How much is that doggy in the window or something? You know, it's but I really talk about dystopias. The fact that Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen did a podcast called Renegades. I mean, that to me is hell on earth. This is like, you know, I've never even listened to it, and I was suffocating from the self-satisfaction. So, you know.
Yeah, as you know, as somebody who fair enough. Says Vine playlists have a lot of royalty-free music. Yeah, I mean, like as a former long-term resident of the state of New Jersey, it makes me very sad that Bruce Springsteen did that. But in any case, yeah, I mean, like going and the fact that when I was like struggling to describe Trump earlier, I mean, that itself feels like something that, like the fact that Donald Trump was president for 4 years in itself feels like something that would have been in like the 1990s, forget earlier than that, right? But like in like the 80s or 90s, that feels like something that would have been in not like serious science fiction, but like, an over the top like parody like vision of the future, right? That's I mean, this is the guy who is like the butt of jokes and in like the Gremlins 2, right? The real estate developer was like a very thinly disguised version of Trump,
Right.
and like his book, I Take Manhattan, has the same cover art as Art of the Deal on it, right? Like that's
Right,
the guy.
right. Yeah, or like Idiocracy, the prequel, or maybe one of those cheap science fiction movies from the 80s or 90s where like people wear big glittery boots and capes, and he's like the dystopian president, my citizens. I could see that too. Like, overweight.
Yeah.
And, I can see that with the hair. The hair is actually science fiction. It's a tesseract.
Where is that, Jake?
Oh no, I agree that we'll just be. I forget if he was actually president, but Back to the Future 2. Yeah, the Biff.
Yeah, Biff. Yeah.
That was
Biff Tannen, who was also I think acknowledged to
as a
be
Trump
like
parody, right?
inspired by Donald Trump. Yeah, like
And then
not
Was
the
he?
original Biff, maybe, but the President Biff in
The
Back to the
President
Future
Biff?
too. Yeah.
When was that? That was before Trump. Well, before Trump actually.
Yeah, that was
became
89.
president, though. Yeah.
He's also Donald Trump comes up a lot in movies in the 80s and 90s, never in a very serious way, like in American Psycho. There are several references to how much Patrick Bateman loves and models himself on Donald Trump.
That is a surprisingly good movie, actually.
It's a very good movie.
A quick story that when I was a kid, there was a TV show called Laugh-In. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ronan Martin's Laugh-In. And when Ronald Reagan was elected governor of California, everybody just thought it was absurd. I should have put this in the piece too. Everybody thought it was so ridiculous, right? It was just a flash in the pan. This washed up B-movie actor gets elected governor of California. Laugh-In used to have a bit every week they called News 20 Years from Today. The headlines 20 years from today. And I went and did this multilateral aid work when communism was collapsing. I went to Europe. Well, actually went before then. When Hungary was still communist. I was there in 1988, and they didn't have any channels on the hotel TV except the state channel and something that ran American reruns. And so it's 1988, and I'm watching these American reruns, watching Laugh-In, and from 1968. And it says, today, in new headlines, 20 years from today, President Ronald Reagan announced, big laugh from the whole audience. And Ronald Reagan was president. Talk about, alternate timelines,
Yeah, which is also a joke in Back to the Future. That Marty is in 1955. Doc Brown asks him who's president, and he says Ronald Reagan, and Doc Brown laughs and said, actually, I can't even properly, Jane Wyman, right? So he says, I suppose Jane Wyman is the first lady, which
good, yeah.
Apparently, when Reagan and his Reagan and his staff were like watching that movie at Camp David, and that was like a very uncomfortable moment, because the reference to Reagan's first wife.
Oh, especially if Nancy was there, yeah. I met Nancy Reagan. That was weird. but Ron was already. Yes, I did. And I met the Queen of England too. But Nancy Reagan, because it was part of a theater group that put on a performance at UCLA Hospital, which became the Ronald Reagan Medical Center. So she came to this event. She came backstage and thanked us. And it seemed nice enough, I guess. I don't have any. I mean, my Queen story is better, but my Nancy Reagan story is not that good.
Yeah.
So in the there actually is a reference in your essay for people who haven't read it to Nancy Reagan because of a some sort of religious themed science fiction movie that she was in.
Right. The next voice you hear, which even though my mother was an atheist, she loved that film. And she was Nancy Davis was the female lead, and very sentimental. And God starts speaking to humanity through all the radios in the world. I've never, I should have questioned more why he needed a medium of transmission, as opposed to direct communication, but it didn't occur to me.
Yeah, that's the end of Star Trek V question. What does God need with the starship? It's the same thing, right? It's like
right,
well, why?
Exactly. I mean, it's like what you need like a cone and a magnet, but maybe so that people.
On the other hand, people say that those are the burning bushes of the 1950s. So there you go.
Yeah, I guess so. And so you never hear the voice of God, but you hear people reacting and you see them waiting for the next. But my favorite thing about it was the ending, which was you see a quote from the Bible, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son, or some quote of that kind. Then it fades away. And then you see a Dory Sherry production. It's like, yeah, this is Hollywood. You get better billing than God, literally. Yeah. So, but that was science fiction of a kind. I mean, there was a whole strain of theological science fiction. There's another science fiction movie where the hero sacrifices himself by going into lower space, like just above the stratosphere, but he survives because there's divine intervention. I mean, there was people were kind of transitioning, I think, between theology and science at that point. And, there was a little bit of navigating the liminal space between God and physics. So.
Well, and even Arthur C. Clarke, you were talking about earlier, I mean, like he's constantly, in a very different direction, right? Is constantly playing with that that space, right? Between science and science fiction and theology. Like he has
99 Names of God.
Yeah.
99 million games of God, or whatever it's called. Yeah.
I think it's the 99 something. Yeah, it's 99 million or something names of God. So they have it's the people. There's like there's a religious sect that's paid these people to have like extrapolate every possible name of God because they've decided that this is like the mission of humanity to do this, and the world will end once they've done it, and so they it's a very simple story, but it's like they finish calculating, they can start to see the stars fading out of the sky, right?
Right.
But like conversely, he has a story called The Star, which is a kind of I don't know, it's like this is sort of a science fiction story played with religion in a way that like Richard Dawkins could love. Because it's about this like a priest or a monk, who's on some sort of galactic, scientific discovery mission, and and he comes to the ruins of this planet that was destroyed. All the life there was destroyed when the star went supernova near there, and And so the priest is experiencing this crisis of faith, which he explains, over the course of the very short story by saying that it's not that it's not the problem of evil per se, right? It's not that there was all this immense suffering and why would a just God allow this and all that, because that's a sort of familiar problem, right? That's not going to throw him. It's the fact that he's done the astronomical calculations about exactly when this particular star going supernova would have been visible from Bethlehem.
Oh, okay.
This, rich civilization that was destroyed for that, so that's, that's a very different,
all right. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Well, Ray Bradbury had a story about a minister, a priest or a pastor who goes to minister to the Martians, so the Martian Chronicles, but then he discovers they're worshiping God in their own way, like a glowing orb or something. So that wasn't a very interesting story. But it is interesting. Yeah. They were wrestling with the God question because it was a lot more vivid in society then than now. Now there's this polarization of evangelical belief, politicized, and then sort of people who just practice their religion in a secular world and are fine with that, and then non-believers. And it's not something that I really see science fiction struggling with a lot. Maybe it is, and I've just missed it, but
I don't think so. I mean, which is interesting in itself that they have even, when some of this stuff was being written, even if you were a non-believer, Christianity in particular, right, was sort of emotionally vivid to you in a way that it might not.
Exactly. Yeah. There was actually one of my favorite Ray Bradbury stories, not explicitly religious, but some astronauts who get blown apart. Their ship gets blown apart in orbit, and one is drifting out to deep space, and another is drifting into the sun. And one guy is going to fall back to Earth, and he's depressed, and he's had a miserable life, and his kids hate him, and his wife hates him. And as he's falling to Earth, he's thinking, I've never done a decent thing for any other human being. This has been a worthless life. And then he falls, and then a mother and child are looking up at the sky, and the boy says, look, a falling star. And the mother says, make a wish, son. And I thought that was a sweet story. I mean, it's sort of theological, but, just sentimental. Right. I have a soft spot for stories like that.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, to go back to, the dystopias, you mentioned, when you're sort of doing the original, the original sort of run through of all the 40 years hence dystopian fiction, you talk about Make Room by Harry Harrison, which is a novel, and I think we've got a graphic for that, that I think probably not a lot of people read now, but probably a lot of people either have seen, or even if they haven't seen it, they're just kind of aware of, because in that ambient way, you kind of can't help being the movie Soylent Green.
Right. And, at that point, Paul Ehrlich was talking. Paul Ehrlich was talking about the population bomb. There's a belief that the planet would be wildly overpopulated. We wouldn't have enough food for everyone. New York City was a hellhole, and had not yet experienced its revival as a theme park for hedge funders. And so people were living in cramped conditions there. He just extrapolated all of that a few years into the future. I forget if it was in the 1990s or wherever. I think I wrote in the article, but that there wouldn't be enough food, and that people wouldn't have enough places to live, and would be sharing rooms and alternating, taking shifts in the same bed and all that. And of course, that led to the movie Soylent Green, and I assume everybody on the planet now knows, which was so obvious when it came out, and you watch Soylent Green. It's like 5 minutes into it, I turned to my friend, it's people. It was just like the most, and then the big climactic ending. It's people. Soylent Green is people. And Saturday Night Live had their satire, Soylent Green too. It's still people. They
had a bunch of sequels too. Like my favorite was Soylent White, where they just had like Rob Schneider going, "Boy, we sure have a lot of paperwork in the future." And then you just see Phil Hartman dressed up as Charlton Heston going, "It's people. Soylent White is people."
Yeah, it's kind of amazing I have to say my experience in that movie is that I've obviously heard the phrase Soylent Green is people so many times just from references to it that I kind of spent the entire movie waiting for them to say it. And it's like, oh, they say it in like the last 5 seconds.
Right. It's the literal ending. It's like ending of the original Planet of the Apes, They did it, the damn fools. They blew it up, or whatever he says, or Charlton Heston says at the end. That's the whole movie, It's the apes are embarrassing. The special effects are terrible. The new series are far better. The new Planet of the Apes series is infinitely better, and of course, the politics are way better too.
Yeah, well, in fact, as I recall,
totally rooting for the apes.
And if I'm not getting this right, a very old Charlton Heston was in the first one of those, playing surely the role he was born to play, which was a dying ape who worships a gun.
I don't remember that, but that sounds, a dying ape who worships a gun. A typecasting, you could say, right? But the new ones, they're pretty good.
Yeah, and it is definitely. I remember Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Watching that, and it's like, oh yeah, right. I mean, look, fair enough. I mean, that's like, I'm not happy about the, apes. This at the beginning, at the end of the progression that we're seeing the start off of the movie. I'm not happy about the apes overrunning and enslaving humanity. But I mean, like, if we didn't want that to happen, we really should have been nicer to the apes, is what I got out of that movie.
We did have a comeback. So, yeah. Well, but, of course, I would root not for the apes in the original series, but when they rebel in the new series. It's like, naturally, my sympathy was with the revolutionaries. Just as watching Black Panther, Killmonger, the supposed villain, Michael B. Jordan, was obviously the more sympathetic character, obviously had it right. I mean, really, royalty in the 21st century, get out of here. We need a revolutionary socialist path. We don't need this.
Well, and this really does connect to something you said in the essay, because, Wakanda is such an extreme example of this, right? That you say that, reflecting back on the science fiction that you grew up reading, but, I think that's a good example of how this is, clearly still the case, right? That there was much more sort of creative imagination about, the technology, the, et cetera, basically everything else than there was about the structure of society, right? And
Exactly.
that is, yeah. I mean, the fact that Wakanda is like, has this like 23rd century kind of technology, but they're still ruled by kings with like trial by combat, is,
right.
I mean, is
and
an
they have
extreme
a warrior
example.
class with, with spears, and it's absurd. But, you saw that in the most far future depictions too, that, galactic empires, so really empires, that's what you got after 20 centuries of scientific progress. And you still see it in science fiction. If you go to the science fiction section of any bookstore, provided you can find a bookstore, then, you'll still see, Lord so and so's. I mean, it's like really, it's like we had how much of human history had like a aristocracy of that kind, maybe 1,000 years at most out of 50 to 100,000 years of human society. And that's what you're going to project 500,000 years into the future. It's preposterous. It's a failure of imagination.
Which is a weird thing to say about Dune.
Yeah. Also,
it's a weird thing to say about Dune, a failure of imagination.
Yeah, but in this dimension, yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of funny. The other day,
you're right.
I had somebody, DM me because they were working on a paper for a philosophy of science class, and they were curious about what I thought about the topic, and it's about Karl Popper's view that the thing that distinguishes science from pseudoscience is falsifiability, right? There's something that would count as as evidence against it, and whether this is an objection, there's like an objection to Marxism there, historical materialism is unfalsifiable. And I don't think I even said this in my response to it, but something I was thinking about is like, no, it's totally falsifiable. Look, here would be excellent evidence that historical materialism is false. Any of that stuff coming true, right? That they have or like the Earth is visited by an alien civilization with unfathomably exact technology, and they still practice feudalism, right? That would in fact show that historical materialism is false. That it's not the case that the further development of the forces of production leads to changes in social form, because apparently you can develop as much as at once, and you're still going to get the social structure of medieval England.
Right, sire, the strangers are approaching. Right. That would disprove it. All right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but I mean, you don't go as much into Star Trek. You do a little bit about the original series, but it's interesting because Star Trek is more on the utopian side of things, but actually in some ways probably it's not the most interested potentially in the actual machinations of the way that the United Federation of the Planets, how it works, but it does kind of represent a different idea of how like humanity and aliens, like how they could be governed, so it's interesting that I think part of why it's so enduring too, because it shows a different way. And then I was also go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, see, Star Trek came along, the original Star Trek, 66, I think, at a time when like we were doing Trick or Treat for UNICEF, right? So, we would go out, in the case of my brothers and I, and we would have one can Trick or Treat for UNICEF and one can Plant a Tree in Israel. It's like now you can have one can or the other, right? I mean, but international law and the occupation of Palestine are incompatible. But at that time, there was this tremendous idealism about the United Nations, about the idea of Federation of Nations. There were these books that liberal parents would own, The Family of Man, with people from different cultures. It's kind of a beautiful ideal that in the pursuit of global power here in the American feudal empire, we've kind of we've kind of tossed into the trash can. We pay lip service to it, but the U.S. government trots it out when it's useful to them and ignores it when it's not, and defunds the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. The Democrats completely defund it. I mean, that we sent $120 million to since last October, in the last 5 months. Now zero. So much for the Star Trek ideal, because really the Federation, the United Federation of Planets, was just an extension of the United Nations. And the the culture of prosperity, right? That the replicator world where you could say, make me a 1956 Buick convertible, and if it could do it for you, that was part of the belief that technology would constantly improve, and that the fruits of that improvement would be shared in an egalitarian fashion, like George Jetson working 2 hours a week at Spacely Sprockets and making enough money to support a family of 4 plus a robot maid and a saucer house in the sky and a flying rocket car. So on one salary, working 2 hours a week, because that was the logical, in a way, projection of how technology was increasing productivity, and productivity gains were being shared roughly equally between employers and employees. So in a sense, Star Trek just took that to the next level of like, okay, we'll have technology that basically takes care of all your material needs. And then, people will serve in Starfleet out of a sense of idealism and to expand the family of planets and obey the prime directive of don't interfere with their culture. It was, and you notice over time that Star Trek reboots and Star Trek sequel series and so on, the sequel films got darker and darker and more reflecting the times. And I noticed I was watching one of the recent Star Treks. I don't know if this is the Picard one, or I couldn't hang with any of the recent ones, but I watched some of them. Discovery, one of the characters said, well, how's this whole socialist, they actually use the word socialist, sharing all the products of technology thing working out or something. So they make it overt, but it was always, implicit. It was a very left-wing.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the Strange New Worlds where she said like there was the engineer who said that like she keeps like a emergency like shack in like Portland in case this whole socialist
it's her
doesn't work out, which was the first time I think they ever like actually called it socialist. But she's a character that has been like living since like I don't know, basically like forever. So she could have seen the development, but I think the implication is that most characters in Star Trek wouldn't even think of it as socialism per se. I'm not sure. They might have also just not mentioned it because it would have been kind of spicy to mention it.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, yeah. I mean, but it does, well, sure, for sure. But like, also it does seem like, yeah, maybe in that world, you don't think of it in those terms. And like, they have like a lot of, I mean, certainly it's, in the Star Trek world, whatever, like there does seem to have been some very amicable, peaceful ending to the Cold War, right? I've got a Russian guy, right? Right there, right? This is
right, exactly.
Well, but there's World War III in Star Trek though, so
Yeah.
it took.
There was a nuclear war, and then the war with the
eugenics
war, yeah,
right, with Khan.
It took some calamities, which hopefully we won't have to go through.
Yeah, but there are definitely
of it. I mean, think about the fact that, well, first of all, it kind of fits with my thesis a little bit in the article, which is that we were kind of expecting something really bad. It was definitely a possibility, but also think about, do you think that a network TV show today could have a Russian character? I think our xenophobia is worse now than it was then. And I saw a video of the Elton John song Nikita. I don't know if you've ever seen that video. It's from the 1980s about a Russian. In the video, it's a Russian like model, like this beautiful woman who's a soldier, but she really wants to be with Elton. Like, okay, it's it's.
That's how much he was on at the time.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think that video could be made today either. So we descended into the xenophobia of the 1950s, really.
I mean, my favorite thing after the right after the war in Ukraine started is that apparently I saw this article that there's a international there's like a federation that regulates cat shows, and they banned cats that were bred in Russia from the competition.
I thought it was a breed called Russian Blue.
Oh yeah. So I think what they did is I don't think it was just the Russian Blues. I think they banned like the like Russian breeds from the cat shows, which I'm sure really showed Putin that like he it's like, okay, got to back off now. Right? Now the cats are being the cats are being unfairly hurt.
Cat too, buddy. Right. Really. I mean, it's so absurd. Yeah. It was always considered necessary to extend even Nixon and Khrushchev, the kitchen cabinet debate, right? I mean, you had to have some sort of, you had to shake hands. I just read recently talk about alternative timelines, the Kennedy, JFK, and I'm not, I mean, as a Cold Warrior, I don't romanticize JFK, but that he was pushing pretty hard to turn the moon project, the Apollo project, into a joint U.S.-Soviet mission. And he was doing it because he didn't want to spend the money, partially, because he thought it was an expensive project, but also as a kind of gesture. So there was negotiation going on with Khrushchev, apparently legitimately authenticated when he died, and Johnson dropped it. So who knows if the negotiations would have succeeded, but can you imagine if Biden said, well, I'm thinking of doing a joint space project with Putin?
Yeah, right.
And that was supposed to, we were on the brink of, considered to be on the brink of nuclear war then. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, now to go full circle to some of what we were talking about earlier, we just, now we've got private moon landings. That's rather than the public kind, and that really speaks to that decline in utopian imagination that you were talking about before, right? I have, as much as I extremely much dislike these kinds of like billionaire tech oligarchs who grew up reading Heinlein and sort of feel like they're Heinlein characters like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel.
Right.
They're not wrong when they say, like, I think that was the Peter Thiel catchphrase, that we were promised flying cars and we got 280 characters. That there is something about the sort of disconnect between this kind of like really ambitious techno-futurism and the sort of technological development that you're supposed to get excited about right now, right? And that is something that I feel like a lot of people on the left to some extent have ceded, that there just isn't like I mean, if anything, I see a lot of people who think that the sort of way to deal with climate crisis isn't by leaning into figuring out amazing green technology, but by, sort of scaling back that, like some kind of civilizational eco austerity. And, and certainly the idea that like, yeah, look, we should actually, we should have, damn it, we should have flying cars, right? We should, we should colonize the moon, but just not like private corporations making lunar company towns, but
right.
An actual
absurd. The U.S. government gave billions and billions of dollars it continues to SpaceX and these other companies. We privatize it's like pharma research, right? We do the research, we subsidize it, and then turn it over to the private sector to abuse. But, there's a way to do. We don't need flying cars, which would I don't think anybody's figured out a way not to make them absurdly energy intensive, fossil fuel intensive, not to mention the navigation problems.
I'll negotiate away the flying cars if you at least give me some nice high-speed trains.
I mean, okay, how about like electric powered vans that run through everybody's neighborhood every 2 minutes, so you can go wherever you want to go without owning a car and have a small social experience at the same time, and it's run by the government. And how about putting our technology in that instead of this ludicrous, fantasy of flying cars? So what? I mean, where you got to go so fast? I mean, that's where I think the techno, and I love technology, but that's where I think the technological imagination has to be matched by the sociological imagination, and that's where we fall down.
I had a question actually, because in the article you talk about how of all the dystopias we kind of could have gotten, we didn't, or futures were kind of in this like maybe boring dystopia, or correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of paraphrasing. But I'm curious what you think, because in some ways it is underwhelming because we don't have these like flying cars, but in other ways I do feel like the world, just all because of like the internet, basically has been completely remade almost as drastically as some of the most extreme science fiction, either dystopias or utopias or whatever. But I'm curious, do you feel like, I was really expecting from all of these movies that the world would that the future would be way more extremely remade than it is? Like, does it feel underwhelming to you, or does it feel like kind of, because like even to me it feels like a little bit of like a shock thinking about where we are with like the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I use the phrase low budget dystopia a couple times too, that this is the one, where you don't have enough money to like build the futuristic cities and the spaceships and the cars. So you have some guy dressed all in black with, something like this in his pocket, a phone, and it lights up, and that's it. That's what you get. That's what you got. I went to a science fiction movie. I got a little box that lights up, So in that sense, it's anticlimactic. But the other thing is, because we had a failure of sociological imagination, we weren't able to imagine something like this. And it would be hard to depict in a movie because it's really a change in cognition, in attention, in the flow of information, and it's constantly changing. And we don't even have the imagination to fully grasp it. You're right. I mean, that it's dramatically different from what we expected. And, in another piece I wrote about my hometown of Utica, New York, going there, hadn't been there in 40 years, and which is where I saw a lot of these movies. And it never would have occurred to me I'd have a little thing in my pocket that connected me to all of humanity virtually instantaneously, and virtually all of humanity's knowledge. So that's a big deal. But I forgot to say, and it also manipulates my behavior and my use of the time in order to aggregate more data for itself, so which is a real dystopia. I actually have an article coming out about that in Current Affairs too. If I can get my dear editor but we all deal with that. But I love him dearly. But so yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that, and I didn't really go into that except to talk a little bit about the failure of the social imagination, and we've really got to look at that. We weren't wise enough to understand and anticipate what this was doing to us until it was too late. But now that we do, I mean, I think it's potentially great technology, amazing technology. But how do we get control of it? How do we democratize it? I wrote a piece for Salon in 2013 about regulating data companies as public utilities. People thought I was insane, or nationalizing them. People thought I was absolutely insane. And now it's like a lot of people are talking about it. They should be, because this is too powerful to be in the hands private sector. I was reading today about quote unquote woke Google art, that controversy where, have you followed that? Where the Google art app, well, I couldn't get it to work because almost everything I asked, no matter how innocuous, that request violates our rules. For something I was writing about the social behavior of ants, I wanted to lightheartedly give me a watercolor sketch of an ant with angel wings, right? Because it was just talking about how altruism among ants. No, that violates our customer use. Is it really? Why? But apparently, what people are. I was reading the big controversy because people would say, "Draw me a picture of the founding fathers of America," and it would draw like a black woman, and so
I think it must have been programmed to make group scenes diverse, and it's just not smart enough to figure out what it should suspend that rule.
Right, and then people were saying, draw me some white women, and it would draw non-white women, and then after a bunch of complaints, it said we can't comply with your request because it's important to support diversity, and these people are fighting about it. And I'm reading this, and no, the answer to this is orthogonal to what you're fighting about. The answer to this is a corporation should not be deciding this either. I applaud their values, if not their execution or their attempted values, but it should, or their simulated values, but it shouldn't be up to them. This is not their doing.
There is something particularly grotesque about the AI I don't know. Grotesque is too strong. But there's something particularly ridiculous about the automated simulation of those values. I remember I was sitting last year, right? Because I think it was I remember it was shortly before the New York live show we did. I remember sitting with friend Jason in a cafe in Rosarito in Mexico, and he'd asked his phone something. Hey Siri, blah 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 question, and Siri gave him the answer just out of habit, right? Being in Mexico, said gracias, and Siri said, I'm sorry, I don't understand that, and just joking around, he says, oh, well, that's because you're a racist. And apparently Siri's programmed response to accusations of racism is, no, I am an anti-racist.
Oh, really? So, yeah. This is, I don't really need a racist or anti-racist Siri. I just need to know, where the Mexican restaurant is or whatever he was asking, I don't really need to get my ethics programmed. It's all,
Yeah. But it does go with the sort of general dismalness of the, version of the future that we're in, that you talk about, that even as you do have, as Jake was saying, that kind of sense of future shock a fair amount, or, when you pull back to think about certain things, it's, there's a certain quality of, I often kind of think this is a little bit like a cyberpunk future, except for not fun or cool in any way.
I got the lighting.
There you go. Yeah. But,
there you go. I during the whole height of the Bush security business, my son actually pointed out to me, we were at the airport and the announcement said, today's threat level is orange. And it went, Dad, that's dystopian. That's really dystopian. I said, you are totally right. You nailed it. It's completely dystopian.
It's so dystopian, and it's so it's kind of heartwarming in a way that it's as much as sadly we didn't get rid of any of the more substantive parts of the post 9/11 security state. I suppose at least give Obama credit for that much. He did get rid of the stupid fucking color-coded alert system. that was which was such a bizarre insult to everybody's intelligence. That's like, okay, this is never going to go to green, because then you'd be telling people they don't need to be worried, and that's just not the mission.
Right. And you don't need us anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's never going to go to red, because it's like it was always really unclear what red would even mean. I mean, is the Constitution suspended? Can they
Right.
So it was always like yellow, orange, or they came up with like this weird shit like elevated orange, because I always had to be in this very narrow range, which really defeated the purpose.
Right. It's like rating an Uber ride, like somebody said, the 2 ratings you can give are 5, and I want somebody to lose their livelihood. I mean,
right.
That's dystopian. And to me, it's dystopian to have a society where, I mean, I think it's great to give your pronouns and all that, but a society that encourages you, a political culture that encourages you to A, give your pronouns and support diversity, but B, look the other way while we're slaughtering women and children in Gaza. I mean, that to me is, it's like being held prisoner by a murderous clown. It's just, it's horrific to me. I mean, because one of these things does not match the others, right? I mean, it's, if you care about respecting diversity, respecting women, respecting ethnic and religious minorities, then how come you're killing so many ethnic minorities and women and disabled people and gay people and everybody, trans people and everybody else that lives in Palestine? I mean, what the hell's the matter with you? You don't mean what you say.
I keep imagining a future where this has been so completely effective that you can have no cost liberal guilt in Israel, and someday Knesset meetings can start with land acknowledgements that this is the traditional land of the Palestinian people.
Oh my God, what a horrible thought, because it's so believable. It really is. Yeah, the land acknowledgements for the. Yeah,
no, but I mean, like all of that stuff is like everything you're describing. I mean, you're right. There is this obvious grisly disconnect, but it's also all of that stuff is the theater of performative inclusiveness, which
right.
You say, okay, well, why do you even feel the need to do that if the thing itself is okay, right? Like if the underlying realities, are what they would be, right? I mean, this is something that scratches that itch of like, oh, we have this sense of injustice. So it's like the Bruce Schneier, security syllogism when he's like making fun of airport security. Something must be done. We have done something, here's something. Therefore,
right.
Let's do it, right? Like this is like, oh, we have this sense of social injustice, which is not wrong. But then, oh, what are we going to do about it? Well, we're not going to do anything that would involve redistributing any resources or inconveniencing anybody in any real way. But what can we do? We can give you a lot of justice theater, right? So we'll just do a tremendous amount of that. We'll do we're going to make a big show of like we can have. What was the thing that when the Valley Labor Report guys were here, we're listening to this podcast that was put out by professional union busters that started out with everybody saying their pronouns, and I think they actually did a land acknowledgement maybe too. But before they got to, we're all a big family here, and you don't need a union, and everybody, you're all associates, right? Because that's all of that stuff. All of that first stuff doesn't cost the company anything.
And I'm sure I know you've seen the video, the CIA recruitment video.
I'm a cisgender millennial with generalized anxiety disorder.
Right. And I'm the CIA. I will assassinate anybody, any political leader. Or to me, the ultimate was the bank CEOs taking the knee during Black Lives Matter. or putting black squares in their Twitter bios. And while they were lobbying Congress to make sure they could still get away with redlining black communities, okay,
Right.
I mean, performative is the word.
Yeah, I always, it's one of
That's
those things,
dystopia.
like Trump having been president, that I have to remind myself, like, I feel like about once every 3 months, I remember that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer knelt in kente cloth. And every time it comes back to my mind, it's like, wait, really? That happened?
Yeah.
Apparently it did. But
Yeah.
yes. So I do have one self-indulgent thing I wanted to do before we ended. I could not figure out a way of like making this organically fit into the flow of the conversation, but
Okay, shoehorn it in.
yeah. We'll just awkwardly shoehorn it in at the end. So in the essay, you mentioned in passing, but with like a strong recommendation, this my favorite short story by Robert Heinlein, which is called "All You Zombies."
Right. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a movie that was based on in 2014 called Predestination, which is not great. It's okay. It's like it sort of takes everything that's in the story and then realizes that doesn't quite fill a movie and adds some other stuff that it shouldn't have. But part of why I like that story so much, it's a time travel story that can be, I guess, accurately summarized by a man walks into a bar, a man. There's this one guy in that story.
Right.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that it's such a, it's such a rare example of something that when it's done well, I really enjoy, but is extremely rare. Certainly, especially on the Hollywood side of things, which is portrayals of time travel that are actually internally consistent and make sense and sort of don't require you to turn your brain off as you watch, until you get to the end credits, which are vanishingly rare, right? But when I see one, I always really enjoy it.
It does the opposite. It forces you to think through the paradoxical nature of time travel, and in a sense, it's like a brilliant thought experiment, and as well as a kind of a very artistic, way to present it. So to me, it's one of those rare examples of a story that actually, particularly if you're younger, when you read it, you feel your mind sort of shifting in a, I mean, I don't mean to sound too psychedelic about it, but it's really expanding your sense of possibility, the way an M.C. Escher painting might, at the same point in your life. It's a beautifully done, very carefully thought out, sort of taking it, I think, as far as it can go, really, of the nature of the time travel paradox as it would apply to one individual.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I can think of other, time travel stories that are consistent. Even the occasional blockbuster, the first Terminator, none of the rest, but but none of them are as interested as that. So yeah, that made me happy to see that little note in the essay. But in any case, we could go on for a very long time, but everybody should read the essay, which once again is called "The Dystopias of Yesterday," and it's really comprehensive. It sort of shows off this encyclopedic knowledge of all the science fiction of the era, and there's all this sort of thoughtful examination of the world in which it's produced and the world that we're living now, and how one kind of looks from the perspective of the other, and how those past dystopias played into it. So I really enjoyed reading it. Thank you so much, Richard. Pleasure as always.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. It was RJ Eskow, who's the host of Zero Hour, which if you are not watching or listening to, you should really get your life in order and do that. But in any case, we are going to go to the post game for patrons in just a moment. We're going to be joined by Victor and Ethan, who are people who I like, and so it's confusing that I continue to subject them to content made by Ben Shapiro, but I am going to in fact continue to do that in the post game. So if you are a patron, you should already have the link for the post game. If you are not, there's really no time like the present. Patreon.com/Ben Burgis. Since we do not yet live in a post-scarcity communist utopia in which all of our material needs are met, and we can rent isn't an issue, and I can ask your replicator to create nice whiskey for you and all of that stuff. All the people you see on the screen do in fact have to make livings. So if you like what we're doing here, please do consider supporting it through the Patreon, and you get the patron exclusive post games every Monday and Thursday night, access to the Discord server, sometimes early access to things, and most of all, our love and gratitude for keeping it going. With that, we're going to go to the post game. I don't know, live long and prosper. Left is best.